MXGP, the podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to MXGP, the official podcast with me, Paul Malin, and Fly Racing's Jason Thomas. It's episode 9. And on this episode, we're going to cover the last 3 rounds where we were in the MXGP of Italy, the old school venue of Montevarchi. Of course, we were in Agada in Portugal, and we've literally just got off the plane from South Africa for the MXGP of the Republic of South Africa at Terratopia, a brand new venue, and the first time we've been there in some 18 years. On this podcast, then, we're going to talk briefly about all those rounds there. We might just touch on the next round that's coming up at Fox Hills, actually, this year. Still have to think about that one. But Fox Hills obviously not been used in 26 years this year, but it's had a massive makeover, a brand new look to it. And I think everybody's looking forward to getting there and going racing again. Well, let me bring in then Jason Thomas. Jason, Fly Racing. We'll talk MXGP in a moment, but you were back to normal this weekend, or the past weekend. You had Redbird, 4th of July, on a Saturday as well, the 4th of July race. And you had a bit of weather, didn't you? You had family tantrums, you had the Hunter and Jet situation after the first race, and Jorge Prado was back on the podium as well.
Yeah, it was a good weekend overall. Definitely started things off with a bang on Friday afternoon, had a big storm come through. Thankfully, everybody was okay. We made the most of it. But yeah, Saturday was a great race. Celebrating a big birthday. Here in America, it's always just kind of one of those races where it's a must on the calendar. And the racing delivered too. It was a particularly hot day. I'd say the hottest of the calendar so far. And I think we saw some of the results move around a bit, maybe mid-moto because of the heat too. I think some of the guys were feeling it, but yeah, I think it was a great race. I think it is it's a great kind of precursor to what we'll see for Southwick as well.
Yeah, and obviously Hunter is leading the championship now, Jet second. Hayden's third overall is 51 points off the lead. Obviously, a lot of people were talking, and maybe even Hayden as well, at the start of the year, about what he was or wasn't going to do coming in 450. I think it was mostly bench races that we're going to be doing that. But still yet to win a race. He's 51 points off, as we said. Some will say, yeah, he's doing exactly what he needs to do. It's a learning year. And some will say, well, he expected, or a lot of people expected, this fight at the front to involve him a lot more. He hasn't taken a race win yet. So he hasn't done what Jet did in his rookie season, put it that way.
Yeah, it's like most things in life, it's all perspective, right? I think the most hardcore Deegan fans are probably expecting more. Yeah. Whether that's fair or not, again, that's where the perspective comes in. Because if you're judging off of what Jet did in 2023, then sure, yeah, this isn't as good as that. But you're going up against some of the best racers in the world right now on their peak form. So I think it's been very respectable. I think he's shown flashes of brilliance, some more than others at times. Moving forward, I don't think Southwick is going to be the best setup for him. You have the Lawrences, who he hasn't really been able to best yet outside of Moto2. He's able to beat Jet. They're going to be great in the sand. Jorge Prado, it's probably going to be his best venue. And then, of course, we'll get into Lucas Kunin, who is an absolute dynamo in the sand. I don't know what he's going to have to offer against Lucas Kunin either. So I think you have to kind of keep things in check, because if you're going on a week-to-week basis, and if you're going to be victim of the moment with Hayden Deegan's progress, I don't know that Southwick is going to be a big boon in that aspect. It may look a little bit worse this weekend than some of the others, but I just think you have to be patient with Hayden. He is improving. He's learning how to race a 450, which is, for some people adapt to it more quickly than others. Jet immediately jumped on it and was like, oh, wow, that's going to unlock his best self. I think for Hayden, he wants to still race the 450 like it's a 250. He wants to rev it too much. He doesn't want to shift it. And those are habits he's going to have to break over time if he ever wants to be his best self. So, be patient with Deegan. I do think his best days are coming.
What about in 250 class? Obviously, Cole Davies, Joe Shimstack, Shimoda, Ryder D, that was your podium. But Shimoda holds a red plate, 4 points over Cole. That one's shaping up to be quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, the 250 class just feels still really wide open. Now, we're starting to get some trends develop. Shimoda's getting back to form. I thought he was a bit underwhelming early in the season. I just expected more, maybe unfairly, but I did. And we're starting to get there now. He's so fit. And I don't think that most people over time have thought fitness and Jo Shimoda walking hand in hand together. But that's reality. He is just extremely fit and can handle harsh conditions better than others can. And I think as we get later in the calendar, it's going to get hotter, more humid. That's going to really help him. On the other side of the coin, there's Cole Davies, where give credit to Ben Townley. He on the front end has said, "Hey, Davies is going to win a lot in America, but these hot days, the most difficult conditions, were a problem for me coming from New Zealand. I think it might be a problem for him also." And we saw the first inkling of that in the second moto. Now, he still got second in the race. That's a great finish. But you did see him have a noticeable drop-off in the second half of that second moto. And then he got very sick after the second moto as well. Threw up a bunch of times right in front of me. So there were signs that maybe the heat will be a concern. Maybe not an issue, but a concern moving forward. And then you have the kitchen situation. I don't really know what to make of that. If anything, he's regressed from the first few rounds, and that's a troubling sign. If you're just looking at where do we go from here, he really needs to have a bounce back ride coming up this weekend in Southwick if he considers himself championship relevant when we get to the month of August.
Sure. Well, let's move on to MXGP then. As we said, we're fresh off of a triple header where we went to Italy, to Portugal, to the Republic of South Africa. In the MXGP class, we saw Lucas Koenen extend his lead over Jeffrey Hurlings. More on that in a moment. Guillaume Ferrez gained ground on Sasha Koenen. And then, of course, the overall situation, the podiums there in the MXGP class. We'll talk about that one first. As it was in the championship, or as it is in the championship, with Lucas Koenen going 1-1, Jeffrey Hurlings going 2-2, Roman Fevre going 3-3, and Sasha Koenen not making the podium in MX2, but it was Guillaume Ferrez once again, second overall Simon Langenfelder, and third overall Yannis Racelis. In terms of the schedule then, our sixth Grand Prix in 7 weeks with those triple headers that we had: France, Germany, Latvia, and then, of course, Italy, Portugal, South Africa. Old school track in Italy. You weren't there, but you were in Portugal. And then, of course, we had Terratopia in South Africa at the weekend. First of all, your thoughts on the track in South Africa, because the riders, when they showed up Thursday, Friday, whenever they got there, pretty much fell in love with the layout. It was wide, it was long, it was spacious. There were big jumps. When you saw it on TV for the first time, what were your thoughts?
I thought it was good. I have respect for how difficult it is to execute a first-time venue on this level. The asks and requirements of MXGP to build a track that's, wide and fast and safe and challenging all at the same time in your first go at it is not an easy task. I thought it was a win. I would much rather, as a racer, be on that track in South Africa versus Montevarchi in Italy. So there are levels to it. Is it as good as Agata? Probably not. But that I have that Portugal track as one of the best. So for a first time venue, for the first, what more could you want in it? And especially what I would listen to the most is if the overall sentiment from the riders was positive. That's all you really need, because they have been vocally outspoken as of late about conditions, and maybe rightfully so. I think they have valid points on that front. So if they're talking good about it, who am I to kind of counter that? Because I think at this point, they would let us know if the track wasn't any good.
Yeah. Well, Lucas Koenen, if we think since France, he's in his overall situations, second overall, he's had 2 wins. And then the last 3 in a row, he went second, first. Going into those 6 rounds, his gap at the top was 4 points over Jeffrey. It's now 68. In South Africa, he took his 50th race win en route to his 21st career Grand Prix victory. He's got 13 race wins already in 2026. He's having a pretty stellar season. On one hand, you can say he's on fire, but then you also have to look on the other side of the coin. The DNFs in Germany and Latvia definitely hurt Jeffrey, haven't they, in terms of his points, which is now sort of getting away a little bit. 68 points between the two.
Yeah, for me, both things can be true. Lucas is putting together just an immaculate championship so far. The starts have been a huge part of the story. It's just making his life that much easier. But he's had solid pace. He really hasn't kind of left any air in the room for mistakes, right? Like, he has put so much pressure on Jeffrey to be perfect that over the course of a championship, that typically works out for you. But yeah, the championship on paper looks much different than it feels. if you basically said, hey, without the DNFs, without mechanical failures, how do you kind of have this championship? It feels like maybe a 12-point differential, 10 to 12. Like Lucas has been a little better, but certainly not, in the 60s. Like that is obviously the result of mechanical difficulties. So I'm trying to kind of keep it in perspective for what I'm seeing on the racetrack, that these two are incredibly close. The margins are scarce between the two. A lot of it's coming down to kind of first lap positioning. We were able to see Jeffrey make a pass in Portugal. That was a big moment. But a lot of it has been, kind of this is where they are. This is where they're going to stay. I was very curious to see what would Jeffrey have been able to do late in, I believe, Moto 1, where he went down. Like he seemed like he was turning on that Jeffrey sprint speed that got the best of Lucas in Portugal. So would we have seen a similar type situation? We'll never know, but that I thought was a very interesting moment. Like it felt like it was coming again. But I look at Lucas's age, lack of experience. I think none of that's showing up. He has so much poise for a 19-year-old. Like it's pretty remarkable to see him kind of control things from the front against someone like Jeffrey, who is so domineering. He's just overwhelming for most people. And it just seems like Lucas is able to return serve a lot, even though he can't win every time. He's able to return serve a lot and just say, yeah, I know you're Jeffrey Hurlings, maybe on your best form ever, but I'm Lucas Kunin and I'm on my best form ever. And we're going to go at this thing for 20 rounds. Like it's a pretty remarkable thing to see.
Return serve. You've been watching Wimbledon. I know you like your tennis, JT. But yeah, when you look at it, you're right. There was a moment in the race towards the end, and we just had a pit lane interview with Davide Di Carli where he said, yeah, the gap is stable at the moment. It's around 4 seconds, but you just never know. We kind of we can't relax, because we expect Jeffrey to launch one of those attacks, and that attack was coming. He got it down from 4 point something to 1.8, I think it was, and he just set the fastest lap of the race. So he got on the gas on that sort of that triple step up, but on the downside, back end went one way then the other. Unfortunately for him, it was a low side rather than a high side, because that could have ended in tears. But when you look at the state of the championship, the last 6 races, or motos, if you want to say, on the other side of the Atlantic, Lucas has scored 137 points. How many do you think Jeffrey scored?
The last 4 races?
Within, like, more or less of Lucas. More than him or less than him?
I'm going to say the same.
138, one more.
Okay.
And Jeffrey has gone like 112 overalls to Lucas's 221. So those two, they're on a different plateau. But it's the qualifying. Yeah, we know about those 2 DNFs, but also the qualifying races. Lucas, from the last 3 rounds, has scored 25 points. Jeffrey's only scored 18. So when you start looking at the picture and breaking things down, the points are being lost on a Saturday at the moment. And over the course of the season, where Lucas has scored 95 World Championship points from the qualifying races, Jeffrey's only scored 66, a difference of 29. So there's that deficit and the 2 races. So if you put 2 second-place finishes in there where Lucas won those races, there's another 44 points. You see how that championship could have swung. But we don't live in a if, but, maybe, shoulda, woulda, coulda world, do we? It's facts are, that's the gap, 68 points between first and second. Jeffrey's still playing catch-up.
Yeah, and you don't know, where it's going to go from here, right? Like one mechanical failure, one big crash, one incident can completely change the narrative of this thing. And that's why I kind of view it as a very tight championship where the points have built up a gap. Like I just feel like these two are on their best form, going head to head, and points be damned for now, because that can change over time. Like we know how quickly that narrative can change, but I don't think the narrative of these two being the best two and going at it head to head most weekends, I don't think that's changing over the next, 7 or 8 rounds. I think that's going to stay consistent. It's what do the points say at the end of that? Is there a moment where, oh, that's a big moment, the points are going to come back down now? The most challenging thing to happen here, I think, for Jeffrey would be for him to just close the points down the way that Guillaume Ferrez has in the MX2 class. I don't see that happening. Just consistent domination where, Lucas is throwing in some 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and that brings, I don't think it's going to be that. I think it would have to be a big moment where an engine goes sideways or there's a first turn pileup or something that Lucas can't overcome that would have to change it. So you're almost hoping against hope. You're going to need help, but crazier things have happened. We know that. That's why we go racing.
Yeah. What about Romain Febvre? 3 podiums from the last 4 rounds. All of those are third place finishes, back to back as well, of course. Kawasaki and Romain Febvre seem to be finding a little bit more consistency in the second half of the season, don't you think?
Yeah, it's coming around, and I wonder how he views this, because a year ago, this was Febvre in the fight, controlling things, withstanding the attacks from Lucas. And he's certainly on the back foot from a year ago. So I guess the question for me really is Roman still riding the same pace, and Jeffrey and Lucas have pushed each other into this other category? Because probably would lean that way. If you look at Roman versus Tim Geiser versus whoever else you consider in the fight, nothing seems to have changed too much there. It's almost as if Lucas took another step because it's his second year in MXGP. He's matured a bit, and Jeffrey's on his best form ever. And they've collectively said, no, we're going to be our best selves, and we're going up here. And Roman at 35 years of age or whatever, it has simply been unable to kind of go with them. So I'm sure it's a little frustrating for Febvre, but if you're looking just momentum wise on the series, it feels a little bit better than it was. Race 2 in Portugal was a step forward. You could see he could see the fight in front of him, which was a big moment. So I just think you continue to put your one foot in front of the other, and you try to just take incremental steps to get closer to those two over the course of the race.
Sure. We have had 11 rounds, so 22 races on a Sunday, yet to win a race on a Sunday. He's got 1 qualifying race win so far this year, and that was in Germany a handful of rounds ago. And as we said, the last 2 rounds have been his most consistent spell, 4 third-place finishes from the 4 races. As a defending champion and a rider who probably had a handful of race wins at this time last year and was on the podium almost every week this time last year, yes, we can see there's been a dip, and there's probably been reasons for it. Yeah, that hard hit in Andalusia. There was something else. There's been a couple, haven't there? But it just seems now that they finally seem to have figured things out and like I said, moving in the right direction. But I guess as the defending champion, without having won a race and not even got close to winning a race at the moment. Well, first race or the second race in Argentina when Jeffrey hunted him down. That's as close as he's got. But like I said, since then, Andalusia, we don't know how bad and beat up he was after that for the next round in Switzerland, and maybe just a knock in confidence. But I wouldn't write him off yet in terms of race wins. He is 123 points off the championship lead at the moment with round 12 to come. That's quite a hefty margin, 55 behind Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I've been thinking about this a little bit of what, is the difference between this year and last year. And Paul, I'm sure you've been in this spot. I know that I have for sure. You come into a season, you've done the work that's required. You feel good about where you are, and you get to the opening rounds and you realize that you're big time on the back foot. You're just not quick enough. The sport or the group collectively took a step forward and you did not. And now you're scrambling to try to close the gap in the middle of the season. And when you look at the way the schedule has been this year, yes, we had a 5-week break, but it's been a lot of racing back to back to back, which is very difficult to make improvements in that type of schedule because all you're trying to do is recover and get back to 100% before you go again. So I kind of am coming around to the thought that he did all the things he was supposed to do. He felt confident, but those two at the front took a step. And now he's been like, oh, we're not where we need to be. So now we have to change the bike. We have to change so they're trying to close that back down. And that takes time. That takes a lot of time when you don't have any. If you're trying to be championship relevant, these races are clicking off and you're like, okay, we're a little better, but we are still nowhere close to winning yet. So I just wonder if maybe the step forward that Lucas made and Jeffrey being so much better than we've seen him, especially switching teams, switching personnel, switching everything in his program. I just wonder if that caught them out a little bit, thinking that hey, we're ready. We're as good as we were a year ago. Unfortunately, as good as you were a year ago is not good enough in 2026. And I kind of feel Tim Geiser's in the same spot. He probably thought he was ready to go win again. And everybody was like, oh, the ask has changed a bit here to win races.
As we said, we're in South Africa at the weekend. Can't talk about that GP without mentioning one of the riders who was at the sharp end, actually, Calvin Villana and Red Bull Ducati. His first ever home Grand Prix, because it's been 18 years since we had the last one. It's fair to say he rose to the occasion. Fourth overall with fifth in the qualifying race. He got an eighth in the first race, a fourth in the second race, and was withstanding the pressure from Tim Geiser in that second half. And talking to him afterwards, he sort of said, yeah, it was just one of those things. It was either going to have to sort of, if he wanted to beat me, he was going to have to come through me type thing. Or, you know, Calvin was really prepared to sort of have to sort of lay it over the line and maybe even bin it, you know, just to sort of stay there and get that fourth overall. Great for Red Bull, Ducati, great for Calvin, great for the fans that showed up as well. And it looks like he's really gelling well with that Ducati, because it's not been an easy season for the team, has it?
Yeah, that was a big step, a big moment for the team. And yeah, there's no way to discount the emotion and just the little extra that he got from going back to South Africa. You know, it was pretty evident all weekend that he simply had a little bit more. And it's not like he knew the track or knew, like, you know, he hasn't been racing in South Africa in a long time. It's a brand new venue. So what else can you really point to other than he was just incredibly motivated? And like you said, he was willing to take more risk than he probably would otherwise. And riders are always gauging risk, because, you know, if you step over the line all the time, if you're habitually on the other side of the limit, you're going to pay a big penalty for it. So it's, okay, I got away with it a little bit, but I need to kind of rein it back in. I just think he felt like that weekend in front of, you know, friends and family and on South African soil, it was worth taking a little bit more risk than he would otherwise. And yeah, he reaped the benefit for it. And I'm sure, you know, he went to bed Sunday evening, or maybe he was on an airplane all night Sunday night, saying it was worth it. You know, maybe I could have ended up on the ground and it ended in tears, but it didn't this time. And, you know, that race, did he win? No. But that effort, that race, he's never going to forget that. He's never going to forget putting in his, you know, his best effort in front of, I'm sure people he grew up, you know, with that probably haven't gotten to see him race in a decade.
Yeah, well, it felt like a win for sure. Let's just break down the championship then. After 11 rounds, Lucas Koenen leads. He's got a 68-point gap over Jeffrey. Roman Febvre is another 55 behind him, 123 off the lead. Then we've got Tim Geiser, nearly 40 points behind the defending champion Roman Febvre, and already 162 off of the championship. And then Maxime Renault, his teammate, 40 behind his Slovenian teammate, 202 off the lead in the championship. Like we said, on paper, things look really, really well for Lucas, but it doesn't always tell the whole story. But that's just the championship in a snippet. Jeffrey 68 behind, and then Febvre another 55 behind him.
Yeah, it's listen, you almost and I definitely don't want this, because of course, you know, Lucas wears fly racing, but if you're purely in it for the sport of it, you'd almost just hope that something happened to Lucas's bike on the starting line one of these races and he wasn't able to participate and bring this championship back in, and like we would have an all-timer down the stretch here. But yeah, it just, I think as a fan, you're just going to have to take it for what it is. Enjoy. Like we don't always get battles like this where week in and week out, their pace seems to be the same. You know, over the course of 35 minutes, their full race time is coming down to within like 2 seconds. That is not a dynamic we have anywhere on earth a lot of the time. So yeah, the points are what they are, but we are getting treated to some fantastic battling at the front. So I'm just kind of taking that as it is, and we'll see where the championship goes.
Yeah, and then finally, race winners. Lucas has 13 in the season so far. As we've said at the top of the programme, he celebrated his 21st Grand Prix victory with his 50th race win. That's some good going in a short space of time. So he has 13 race wins. Jeffrey has 6. Tim has 2 for the season, and Tom Vial 1. Are we surprised? Yes or no? I'm guessing the biggest surprise is the deficit or differential between the most wins and, you know, with 13 and Jeffrey with 6. You would have expected more, but as we know, there's a couple where have gone begging with potential, you know, race wins with those DNFs. But other than that, even when he's started second on occasion to Lucas, just wasn't able to bridge the gap. So surprise, yes or no? Not really.
The only surprise I really have is the separation that those two have consistently been able to execute. I simply thought that Geiser and Febvre, and I don't know, I didn't feel Vial was going to be in the fight at the very sharp, you know, the sharpest end there. But over Febvre and Geiser, specifically Geiser, I would say, I thought they would be more in the fight more often. And we've seen them in the fight. You know, they've been Geiser has won individual races, Febvre has not, but they've been able to fight at times. But on a consistent basis, if you look at over the course of, we've had 30 plus individual races now, the top two have separated themselves by big margins at times. I did not expect them to be that much better. I just thought we'd have a little bit more of a dogfight, amongst them, and a lot of variance. So that's the one thing that I think I was probably just wrong on the front end.
Before we start talking MX2, let's just have a quick shout out to our sponsor, FMF, of course, FMF Racing, the American exhaust pipe manufacturers, the Flying Machine Factory. Been a major part of the racing scene on both sides of the Atlantic and all over the world for the past 50 years or more, winning numerous titles on both sides of the Atlantic and all over the world, always striving for perfection, always innovating, built by hand from the ground up. FMF continuing to innovate, building things the right way, the American way. Right, let's talk MX2. In South Africa, the podium there was Guillaume Ferrez, a double race win for him. Second overall, Simon Langenfelder, a third and a second. Johannes Raceless on the podium again, back-to-back for the rookie, a fourth and a third. Things are looking interesting in MX2, aren't they? Because at the start of this particular triple header, Jason, Sacha Koenen went into Portugal with 41 points over Guillaume Ferrez. That's now down to 14. Because Ferrez has won the past two GPs in Portugal and South Africa. You were in Portugal. He swept the board, won all three races. I know you like the track there, but he looked like he was on a different racetrack. I openly said that I think he was the best rider in the paddock that weekend, MX2 or MXGP, just the way that he rode. He looked so easy and so calm and confident. And then to see him do it again in South Africa, not a big surprise, I guess.
Well, Jeffrey Hurlings would like a word about that Portugal take. But, Ferrez has been a revelation. I very much agree with you on making it look easy. He doesn't seem like he's anywhere near the limits. And that can be deceiving. I'm sure he's pushing as hard as he can. He doesn't want to be a second and a half or 2 seconds up at times, like he was in race 1 in South Africa. But there's also not really any mistakes coming either. So if I was Sacha Koenen, I would be concerned about the momentum that Guillaume Ferrez has. The starts are there, fitness is there, confidence is, I don't think, ever been higher than it is for him. And Sacha, he still looks great, but the winning has not been happening, right? We saw a big crash, which he was able to overcome in race 2 in South Africa. That needs to go away. He's been much better about that in 2026, but those type of crashes where you're flipping both body and bike down the racetrack, that can't happen if you want to be champion, because you could have easily broken something on the motorcycle, or worse, broken something on your body, and then the championship is over.
Well, the bike was steaming, wasn't it, after that crash in race 2?
Yeah. So fortunate there to get away with whatever was going on there. But I think there's a lot to be concerned with, even with a 14-point lead. Like, I understand you're still in control of the championship, but it doesn't feel like he's in control of the championship right now. It feels like Ferrez is in charge, even though he's still 14 points to the worst. So time will tell. These things are fleeting. Momentum can shift very easily and very quickly. But this is what a breakout season in the end for Ferrez. If anybody, including myself, had doubts about where this was going, I don't think we should now. He has shown that he's going to be at the front from here on out. And he told us this, Paul. He told us in France, La Capelle-Merval, he's like, if you're counting me out of the championship, it's at your own peril. Like, you should not be doing that, because I'm coming, and I'll be damned if he isn't here right now.
Yeah. And just even seeing him in and around the paddock, he's just very loose, very confident, having a good time. Nothing seems to be phasing him at the moment. And I guess part of that is you're not leading the championship at the moment, are you? It's easier to follow than it is to lead, and apply the pressure that way mentally. But, we'll see if that changes, if he takes over the championship leader's red plate. We won't know that until Fox Hills in a couple of weeks' time. What about Simon Langenfelder, of course? Seems to have arrested his podium drought. He had 4 podiums from the first 4 rounds. He had 6 off of it, the last 6 rounds. But then obviously he got second overall again in South Africa. So a step in the right direction for him. He's now 12 points clear of Camden McClellan in third in the championship. So overall, and he got 2 Foxhole shots as well, don't forget. So he was able to, put himself where he needed to right at the start. So I think whatever was happening in the past few races, 6 races, he's been able to sort of turn that corner for now, at least. So positive signs for Simon Langenfelder, and there's still time for him to get into this championship as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess it's all how do you want to view it? Through which lens are you viewing this? Because if you're looking at it compared to like the opening round in Argentina, not as good as that. He doesn't have a big edge where he can just push people out of the way and move himself to the front from any kind of start like that. That is not a dynamic or any sort of, thing he can lean on right now. But if you want to compare it to France or any races, rounds like 7, 8, this is much better than that. So again, if you are the Triumph team, if you're, Red Bull KTM Ducati, you're not that concerned because he's so far out of the points and he's not dominant. If you're just Red Bull KTM proper, you're like, okay, we're back on track. We're going back the right direction. Yes, we need a lot of help to be back in the championship fight, but at least the starts are back. The riding is much better. So yeah, it all depends on how you're viewing this thing, but it's been a peculiar season for Langenfelder and one I don't really have answers for. I'm guessing he would have more insight than we do about what's gone on, but maybe not. I've been racing at times and been like, I have no idea why I'm not as good as I was. It's just been a kind of a strange up and down because I'd be lying if I said after the first round, I'm like, he's going to kill these guys. He is going to win a lot. And this might be a 50 to 100 point differential by the time you guys get to Australia. It has not gone that way at all. Yeah, just kind of a strange one that I don't necessarily have the right answers for.
Yeah, and it's you say he came out swinging, didn't he? All guns blazing at the start of the championship. Was he 51 points down on the lead, 37 behind Guillaume Ferrez? So championships have been won by much bigger margins, at this stage of the championship, and even sort of got into the last few rounds. So I don't think there's still any kind of cause for concern for Simon Langenfelder. He's that placid. We say it every time we're on here. What about Yannis Racelis? Just mentioned a moment ago, third overall. He got a second in Portugal with a 2-4, and he got a third in South Africa with a 4-3. There's some solid consistency there in that, a second, a brace of fourths, and a third, 2 podiums. Kid's starting to show up, isn't he? And I wonder how much of that is because he's not in school anymore, not having to worry about exams and studies and things like that. It's almost like the shackles are off and he's just kind of really finding his feet now in this MX2 category.
Yeah, he's riding really well. And maybe it's not fair, but I'm not even thinking so much about 2026 with Giannis.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what does 27 and 28 and 29 look like? Because if you look around, a lot of the people that are doing the winning right now are going to be gone. They're not going to be factors or in this championship anymore. They're either going to be stateside or racing MXGP. That's a fantastic setup for a very young Yannis Racelis who is kind of breaking out at this point of his career. I mean, we could be looking at a future MX2 champ with the way this is trending. You look at the amount of time he still has left to improve. He's going to be a hot commodity. I have no idea what his situation is with Yamaha, if he's locked up for the long term, but I would bet there are a lot of people, calling his agent or his parents wondering what his future prospects are, because it certainly feels like he's going to be doing a lot of winning over the next 3 years.
And you saw it for yourself as well, not just in Portugal, but in La Capelle Marival in France, where he led that second race. And it was almost like the wind got knocked out of his sails when he came round the final corner with a handful of seconds left, therefore 3 laps to go. And it was almost like that was 1 extra lap too many. If the 2-lap board had gone out then, maybe we would have seen still a challenge for his first ever race win then, because he was riding that well even back then, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it was a really hot weekend in France, so maybe there was a little bit of that, but he's learning, we have to remember, I know you know this, but we have to remember collectively how young he is and how new this situation is for him at the very front. So things are happening very fast mentally. There's a lot of emotion there, nervousness, and like, I can't believe I'm about to win, right? That is going to go away, and things are going to, they're going to slow down, for lack of a better term, and he's going to be able to think through situations. It's going to feel much more manageable the more times he's at the very front, which is a great thing for him because he's finding himself there time and time again. He's a great starter, which is a huge boon in MX2. We've seen how powerful that can be over time. So I feel great about where this is trending for Racelis. That kid's going to be really special. This is, we're going to look back, let's say we go fast forward to 2028. we're going to look back at 2026 and say, there it was. Those were the signs of how we got to where we are now, because I think those days are coming.
Yeah. We mentioned Sasha already in that kind of conversation with Guillaume Perez. 4th overall, drops off the podium for the first time in a few races. 2nd in race 1, didn't have an answer in the end for Perez. 6th in race 2, that crash on the opening lap. That's just indicative of probably thinking panic mode. You know, he made a bad start, helped by the fact that Langenfelder ran him wide in the first turn. Well, when you're on the outside of somebody like that, you know the guy here on the inside is always going to run you wide. He was able to pull out of that and, you know, go around the outside of the turn. I think, you know, he came out around about 12th or 15th place. But he made good ground, but that all started on the basis that he knew Perez was ahead of him. And obviously the championship lead was coming down from the 32 back down to sort of 27-ish after that first race. And then, you know, it's like, yeah, panic seemed to set in. And he rushed on that opening lap when he didn't need to. And how many times do we say it that you can't win the race on the first lap, but you can certainly lose it. And when he came into that turn, unlucky to fold the front and then the back hit that divot and then pin him round? Or was that just, as I said, just too much too soon in the race when he didn't need to, maybe?
Yeah, I think what we see from Sasha Kunin is what we're going to continue to get. I don't think that, you know, zebras change their stripes. Like, it's just not going to change for him. He's going to always push the envelope to the nth degree. Like, that's just who he is as a racer. And it comes with crazy good sprint speed. And he's been able to manage that, kind of remove some of the variance and some of the crashing in 2026. Certainly better than it's been in prior years. But this is just who he is. And asking him to be cool, calm, collected the way that kind of Perez has been, or, you know, Langenfelder when he's on form, that's just not who Sasha is or going to be. I don't think we're ever going to get that. I don't even think we should ask for it. So this is it. He's going to win some. He's going to get great starts. And there are going to be moments where we're both jumping out of our chair, hoping that he just climbs back on his motorcycle from a big crash, or even just big moments where it's really close.
And that's what makes him so exciting to watch.
Yep.
And that's what makes this MX2 title chase so exciting to watch.
Yep, no question. And it's just going to come down to, can the winning, he's going to need to win. Make no mistake, he's going to need to win races down the stretch to win this championship. That is, I don't think there's any way to get around that. Can the winning offset the crashes like he had on the first lap of race 2? That's it. That is the equation that he has to figure out. And he's got to wrap his head around this Guillaume Perez thing. If he can't find a way to solve that equation, it's all for naught anyway, because the momentum is squarely on Perez's side. So not an easy thing. Like, having said all that, he still has a 14-point lead and he's been phenomenal. You know, those Saturday qualifiers have been a huge part of this story. Like, he had won like 5 or 6 in a row at one point. So I just think if you're, you know, they have a weekend off, not necessarily the Kunins, which we'll talk about, but everyone else has a weekend off. You know, Davide Di Carli, they're going to go back to the race shop and think through things. I think you just have to think about what went well. What were we doing so well when we were winning the championship, and how did we get to a 41-point differential? It's excellence on Saturdays. It's making sure that you're in the top 2 or 3 on the opening lap, and then just letting things unfold in front of you, not making the unforced error, which has plagued Sasha so many times over the course of his career. And I'm not saying they can just be like, oh yeah, that's what we need to do again. But I think these weekends off give you a time to review what's gone poorly, how did they close the gap down, and what do we need to do to get back to our best self? Because I don't think they can control what Perez is doing. No. They need to focus on what they can do perfectly well. They need to just sort out, you know, putting yourself behind Langenfelder on the first lap or the first couple of corners, that puts yourself in jeopardy. And it's, I qualify that by saying, well, he was in second. That's pretty good. Sure. But you know what would be better? First would have been a little bit better. So not an easy thing to do. It seems like it's going to be a real fight at the front of MX2 all the way from here. But knowing Sasha Kunin, he's not scared of a scrap. Like, he is not scared to fight for this thing all the way. And that's probably how he'd want it anyway.
Yeah. What it does show, though, is how fickle a 41-point lead can be. Unlike his brother, who has a 68-point lead, that's more than a Grand Prix, but even that can be shot down with an issue or two.
You think?
What about Camden McClellan? Sorry?
No, I was going to say, do you think, Langenfelder's kind of looking at it and saying, well, look how quickly that changed for, Perez was 41 down and now, so 51, not a big deal. If I just get hot here, things can change quickly.
Exactly. We'll look at the MX2 Championship last year with Kai and Simon, after Matterley, the British Grand Prix. Not sure how many rounds were left there, but, maybe a good 7 or 8 races. He was 74 points off the lead and he got it down to 9 or thereabouts at the final round of the championship, which just fell short. But he didn't lose that because he, of whatever, you can say there was a million things. Kai lost that championship because he allowed certain things, crashes and mistakes, to sort of dictate that narrative that forced him into that situation, whereas, but in the end, what we saw was that he had to ride over himself just to sort of get back in contention. That's exactly what he did. He just fell short by a round, maybe. And we already have 1 round short less this year anyway, 19, not 20 races. What about Camden McClellan, 5th overall? He was disappointed. I know he was disappointed. I saw him after the race before we left back to the hotel. Fast, but just poor starts, 5th and 4th in the races. And actually, he said he just couldn't hold on in the last race. Kind of, he doesn't know what it was, but just his hands seemed to sort of not cramp up. But he just said he couldn't hold on. He was sort of he just couldn't push anymore in that second race. And there was a point, wasn't there? I think we had Yanis on the podium, then Camden was on the podium, then Sasha was on the podium, and it just kept. And it was that situation where once Yanis got to, his position, third. That kind of decided the podium for him. But had he have been, passed again by Camden, then it would have, I think, been Sasha on the podium. So Camden needed a couple positions. You couldn't really take your eyes off of it. But, he would have been disappointed not to have been on the podium at least at his home round. But some of that, I think he sort of said between the lines, was first home Grand Prix, tried a little bit too hard maybe, but now he's got that one under his belt. Go back there next year. He knows what to expect and can deal with it in a different way because, he's young. He's not had to experience that before, that home GP experience.
Yeah, I was a little, I shouldn't say disappointed because I don't have, anything to lose. But I did expect a little bit more late in race 2, for him to be repassed there. We've seen him so strong late in races where he is the aggressor. He is the one putting pressure on everybody late. So that was a little bit of a bummer. I'm sure he'd love to have that race 2 back, especially when a podium was on the line there. But like you said, he'll learn from it. It was almost like the antithesis of Vlanderen's race, where Vlanderen, experienced veteran, rose to the occasion. Like it fueled him. Like maybe this was just a little bit more of a mental drag. Like Camden was thinking a little bit too much and the pressure of performing in front of them got to him instead of driving him more forward. So just kind of an interesting thing, but yes, I'm with you. I was like, oh man, it's right there. And to lose that spot there after you'd taken it, to lose it back, I was like, that's going to be a tough one to find any sleep on Sunday night.
Yeah. And what about Liam Everts finally? 6th overall, 6th and 5th. At times he showed great speed. He put himself in great positions, battling with all kinds of different riders. But at the end, 6th overall. That's still 3 positions shy of another podium that's gone begging potentially.
Yeah, it's been that kind of season. I still expect big things from Liam Everts. I know he's capable of it, but he's just missing 1% somewhere. I don't know if that's lingering effects of injury or who knows, right? Who am I to say what's missing? But you can see it out there. Like when the other guys are going to the front, even when Valan's healthy, you can see it in him. Simone this weekend had flashes of it. Perez is obvious. Sasha's, it's always kind of there. We haven't seen that kind of signature moment from Liam in 2026 yet, where he's at the front and he is kind of showing what he has to everyone. I'm still waiting for that. And I don't know what's holding him back. That would be, is it not comfortable with the motorcycle? Is it just not quite on form and kind of head scratching? But again, I do know he's capable of being up there, but there's just something missing. So that's what I would be asking if I was, Stefan or, Rasmus or whoever is in charge of kind of finding answers. I would be trying to diagnose what what are we missing? Is it because you can't fix anything until you know exactly what's wrong or what's missing. And I simply don't know the answer to that. So hopefully better days are ahead.
Yeah. How often, obviously you fly quite a lot. How often when you've been on your travels, have you done a 10-hour flight and landed in the same time zone where you took off? Because that's what we had with South Africa this weekend. Normally, like you jump on a plane, you come to MXGP. What have you got? A shift forward in time of around about 6 hours, 5-6 hours?
Yeah, for me in Boise, it's 8. So
yeah. And then of course, when you've done China, you're like another few hours down the road. Horrible. This weekend we had a 10-hour flight, and it was the same time as Central Europe. So, the guys, there was no jet lag. If you had a daytime flight, you were awake the whole flight as you normally would be, which meant you got to the hotel and got your head down, woke up, didn't have to sort of set alarms that you had to be forced to wake up because of a forward time zone. So on that respect, it was quite refreshing. Hospitality was absolutely second to none. Everybody made us feel very, very welcome. As we said at the top, like the riders liked the layout of the racetrack. So yeah, if we go there again, maybe stick it on your bucket list of, somewhere to go and see and go and do. Obviously, it depends on your schedules. Talking of rounds, the next round, 2 weeks from now, 18th, 19th of July, we return to Fox Hills for the Monster Energy MXGP of Great Britain. Am I right in thinking the last time you went there was probably for the Nations in 98 when it was very wet, very muddy, or have you been there since then? Or maybe
I've
you
never
weren't
been
even
to
there
Fox
then?
Hills. Never been. So I remember watching those guys try to maneuver around the mud, and Ricky Carmichael having the worst day probably of his career in 98 at Fox Hills, but I've actually never been there.
Yeah. But Tommy Searle, if you go onto his Instagram, he did a lap the other day, so you can sort of see how it was. From my side, yeah, that they've kind of positioned the start to where it was in 95 when, we had the GP there. It was a double header. Wasn't the first ever because Suzuka did that a couple of years earlier in early 90s. But 125, 250, it was a 90-degree first turn that dropped down the hillside and then 90 degrees back along the valley. They've softened it off a little bit more now, so it's almost like one downhill continuous right-hand sweep, so that foot off the rear brake. But they've tried to keep as much as the original footprint from those 90s races intact, along the valley, back up Fox Hill and using all of the hills, some nice big jumps there as well. So if you've not seen it and you want to see it, have a look. Tommy Searle's Instagram. I'm sure he will welcome the extra numbers because, he hasn't got that many. Bless him. Not that popular, is he? But it's also round 3 of WMX and EMX 125 presented by FMF Racing, round 8 of 10. So those guys have racked up, quite a few rounds already. And in terms of location, we're about 60 miles, 100 kilometers west of London Heathrow because people are going to be flying in there. So literally straight out on the M4, get off at junction 15, and it'll be signposted from there. The track, as I just mentioned, has had something of a significant makeover. The track crew down there with Justin Barkley and Alfie Smith bringing in a bit of dirt, using old dirt, like I said, it's been freshened up. And the first visit in 26 years. Are you keen to see a new venue? Because you've been to Matterley, you know how that played out and what the atmosphere was like there. But this, if we get the kind of numbers that we were used to getting back in the 90s, you've got these steep side valleys and the fans can really get on top of the riders and, it can really generate something else. So I'm looking forward to it. What about you, JT?
Yeah, I am. And I like the kind of old school feel of the big elevation changes. If you look back through photography of racing, even like races in Russia, other places like there, just see these crazy downhills and people just lining the hillside. And okay, yeah, some of them are like it was just rock hard and not really any soil to it. But I'm looking forward to that kind of just visual representation. A lot of elevation. I think it changes kind of the way the race goes, and it's just a different ask for the rider. So that's going to be fun. It's a little bit of nostalgia thrown back in there. So just hopefully, and you would know better than me, hopefully the weather will cooperate because that can always be a question with this type of race. We've seen some of the worst mud races ever at Fox Hills. But to answer your question about the time zone thing, yes, I would love to go back to South Africa. I went one time, not for a race, just for other business purposes in 2013. And it was the same time zone as Europe, as you mentioned, but it was the worst jet lag I'd ever had. It was basically a full day the next day when I landed. It's about so I flew from Boise, Salt Lake, Atlanta to Joburg, and it was like 17 hours from Atlanta. And I took off from Atlanta at 4 p.m. and I landed in Johannesburg at 4 p.m. local time. And I think my body was just like, yep, too much for us. We're done. I was out of commission for days. Like I felt like I had to go work, but I did not feel well. So I would love to go back down and hopefully better prepare myself for that situation. So hopefully the calendar would work out and I would get to go next year. But I'm sure all the riders this weekend, most of the paddock just hops on a plane from Amsterdam, hops over, and 30-minute flight and then drive an hour. That's going to be a nice reprieve. And then there's some local racing that they won't really have to fly so far for over the next month or so.
Yeah, well, Fox Hills starts another 3 in a row. Of course, the week after that we go to Czech Republic, Lockett. I believe you've been there.
Yep.
Then we go to Lommel. And then, of course, we get a week off. We've got Uddevalla in Sweden, Arnhem in the Netherlands, and then a week off. And then we got the final rounds, which is a lot of travel, obviously, from Central Europe to Turkey, which is a 4-hour flight, into Shanghai, which is another few hours, down the road there. And then, of course, to Darwin, Australia. So the same 3 final rounds as we had in 2025. Actually, you've been to China as well, haven't you? You went there a few years ago.
Yeah, 2019.
Yeah. The track, not the same as it was back then, but just around the corner from where it was, but hot, humid, and whatever. So, we've got a tough run still to come. But, we're out of time. But, JT, thanks for joining us once again. When do we see you again, or is it too early to say at the moment?
It's a great question. I don't know if Lommel is going to work out this year or not. For sure, Motocross of Nations, but who knows? I try to be opportunistic with these things. The biggest thing I'm battling is the calendar here stateside. These SMX races plus the playoffs now. I would love to go one of the flyaways in September, but the addition of the playoffs has kind of made that impossible. So time will tell. Worst case, though, I will be joining you in Ernée for Motocross of Nations.
Cool. Well, look forward to it. Thanks for your input as well on this podcast. Invaluable, as always. And we will do this again probably, not sure yet. It's maybe going to be between sort of Czech Republic and Lommel, or maybe just after Lommel, so we can wrap up another 3 races. But watch this space, the MXGP official podcast with me, Paul Malin, and Jason Thomas. But we're out of time on this one. Hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll see you at the races soon. JT, all the best. We'll, crack on with your season over there. And we'll touch base again in the very, very near future. Well, that's it from us too. See you next time. Bye for now.
MXGP, the podcast.